I smell a thief who is starving to death.
Excuse me?
You autopsied it. You dissected a memory.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mary.
And I'm Linda.
Oh, Linda, hold on to your reading glasses for this one. We have a story today that is going to make your heart flutter like a hummingbird in a honeysuckle bush. It's got pride, it's got pastry, and it's got a man in a very expensive suit walking into the wrong bakery.
Or the right bakery, depending on how much trouble he wants. Mary, honestly, suing a billionaire for $1 single? That is the kind of petty I aspire to be. It's not about the money. It's about the audacity.
Exactly. It's about dignity. Evelyn Hart, our heroine, wasn't going to let some corporate giant steal her grandmother's legacy. She wanted an apology, not a payout. But, oh, honey, she got so much more than an apology.
Well, don't give it away. Let's see how Mr. Fancy Suit handles a woman who knows how to wield a rolling pin. Let's get into Chapter 1.
Chapter 1, the $1 War. The bell above the door didn't just chime. It announced an invasion. Evelyn Hart did not look up immediately. She was wrist-deep in a mound of dough, the flour dusting her forearms like fine snow. The morning rush at Hart's hearth had cleared out an hour ago, leaving only the scent of cinnamon, browned butter, and the quiet hum of the convection ovens. This was her sanctuary, or at least it was supposed to be, until the heavy oak door swung open with a confidence that rattled the window panes. She knew who it was before she even wiped her hands. The town of Oakhaven didn't produce suits like that. Charcoal gray, Italian wool tailored to a sharpness that could cut glass. Julian Thorne stood on the welcome mat. He looked less like a culinary thief and more like a man who had taken a wrong turn on the way to a board meeting. He held a manila envelope in one hand and a small white box in the other. Evelyn slowly dusted her hands on her apron, her movements deliberate. She refused to rush. She refused to be intimidated in the shop her grandmother built board by board. Mr. Thorne, Evelyn said, her voice cool and steady, barely rising above the hum of the refrigerators. I assume my lawyer made it clear. All communication was to be in writing. Julian stepped forward. The shop felt suddenly smaller. He placed the manila envelope on the counter, right next to a cooling rack of cherry turnovers. He didn't look like the shark the newspapers described. He looked tired. There were lines around his eyes that the glossy magazine covers usually airbrushed away. Miss Hart, Julian replied, his tone low and surprisingly polite. Your lawyer was very clear. He is suing me for theft of trade secrets. Damages sought, $1 United States dollar. It's the principal, Mr. Thorne. Your Thorne home-style tart tastes exactly like my grandmother's Sunday best. Exactly, which is impossible, unless you stole it. Evelyn walked around the counter. She needed to stand her ground without the barrier of glass and pastry between them. She was shorter than him by a foot, but her posture, straight-backed, chin-high, made up the difference. I didn't steal it, Miss Hart, but I did taste it. Julian opened the small white box he had brought. Inside sat one of his company's mass-produced tarts. It looked perfect, too perfect, artificial, and you are right. The flavor profile is disturbingly similar. So you came to confess. Evelyn crossed her arms. Or to settle. I don't want your money. I want you to stop selling it. The air in the bakery grew thick. Outside, the coastal wind whipped against the glass, but inside, the silence was absolute. Julian looked at the tart, then back at Evelyn. His eyes were a startling shade of blue, sharp and assessing, but devoid of malice. I cannot stop production. The contracts are signed with distributors nationwide, Julian said. Evelyn felt a flash of hot anger. Then get out of my shop. However, Julian continued, ignoring her dismissal. He slid the manila envelope toward her. I have a counterproposal. I read your lawsuit. I read your interview in the local paper about integrity and soul in baking. If this is a buyout offer, Mr. Thorne, I will throw you out myself. It's not a buyout. Julian unbuttoned his suit jacket, a gesture of surrender. Ms. Hart, my company is drowning in efficiency but starving for quality. We have the logistics, but we've lost the flavor. He tapped the envelope with a manicured finger. Inside that envelope is not a settlement check. It is a transfer of deed, a majority stock option. Evelyn blinked. She looked at the envelope, then up at his face. Excuse me? I don't want to fight you for $1. Ms. Hart, Julian said, his voice dropping to a whisper that felt intimate in the empty shop. If you think you can do it better, take it. I am offering you the research division of Thorne Culinary. You fix the tart. You fix everything. Evelyn stared at him. The flour on her apron suddenly felt very heavy. He wasn't countersuing. He was handing her the keys to the kingdom that was trying to crush her. And if I refuse, she whispered. Julian smiled, a small, sad curve of his lips. Then I suppose I will owe you $1. He turned to leave, the bell chiming again, not an invasion this time, but a question mark hanging in the air. Oh my heavens! Linda, did he just give her the company? Just like that?
He didn't give her the whole company, Mary, just the headache part. The research division, that's where the problems are. He's smart. He's outsourcing his stress to the woman who hates him. It's brilliant.
You are so cynical. I saw a man who is tired of fake food and wants a woman with a real heart to save him. He looked into her eyes and saw the truth.
He looked into her eyes and saw a way to fix his stock price. But I'll admit, the chemistry? It's rising like a good sourdough.
It certainly is. Evelyn has a choice to make. Does she take the power, or does she keep her peace? We'll find out next time. Chapter 2, The 4 a.m. Clause. The manila envelope sat on Evelyn's kitchen table like a loaded weapon. It had been 3 hours since Julian Thorne walked out of Hart's hearth, leaving behind a scent of expensive cologne and a proposition that defied gravity. Evelyn sat with a cup of chamomile tea that had gone cold long ago. Her reading glasses were perched on the end of her nose as she turned the pages of the document he had left. It wasn't a joke. It was a consulting authority agreement. It gave her full creative control over the artisan line of Thorne Culinary Logistics. It offered a salary that made Evelyn's breath hitch in her chest, enough to fix the bakery's leaking roof, pave the parking lot, and maybe, just maybe, retire before she was 80. But then she found it. Page 12, paragraph 4. The catch. The consultant must successfully replicate the target flavor profile using existing Thorne Logistics industrial equipment within 30 days. Failure to achieve mass production viability results in the immediate forfeiture of all legal claims regarding the intellectual property. Evelyn slammed the paper down. The arrogance, she muttered to the empty room. He wasn't giving her the company. He was setting her up. He knew her recipe relied on touch, on the specific humidity of the air, on the way the butter folded into the flour. He was betting she couldn't translate love into a machine that pumped out 5,000 units an hour. And when she failed, he would legally own her grandmother's flavor forever. She didn't call her lawyer. She grabbed her keys. The Oak Haven Inn was the only place in town with high-thread count sheets, so Evelyn knew exactly where Julian was staying. It was dusk when she pulled her beat-up station wagon into the gravel drive. The inn was a sprawling Victorian affair, all wraparound porches and white wicker furniture. And there he was. Julian Thorne was sitting on the porch, a silver laptop glowing on his knees. He had discarded the tie, and his top button was undone. He looked less like a titan of industry and more like a man trying to catch his breath. He didn't jump when Evelyn marched up the steps. He simply closed his laptop, as if he had been expecting her. Page 12, Evelyn announced, skipping the pleasantries. She stood at the bottom of the porch steps, looking up at him. "You think you're clever, Mr. Thorne." "I think I'm practical, Miss Hart," Julian said, his voice smooth. He stood up, leaning against the railing. "You say my mass-produced tart lacks soul. I am giving you the machine. Put the soul in it. You know it's impossible." Evelyn shot back. "My crust is flaky because I handle it gently. Your machines beat the dough to death. You're setting me up to fail, so you can steal the recipe legally." Julian walked down the steps, closing the distance between them. The cicadas were singing loudly in the old oak trees, creating a wall of sound around them. "I am not setting you up," Julian said, and for the first time, a crack of frustration showed in his polished veneer. "My company feeds 3 million people a week, Evelyn. Single mothers who need a quick dessert, truck drivers, hospital cafeterias. They deserve something that tastes good. If you can't scale your magic, then maybe it isn't a recipe. Maybe it's just a hobby." The insult landed with a thud. A hobby? Hart's Hearth had paid for her children's college. It had buried her husband. Evelyn stepped closer until she could see the gray flecks in his stubble. "You think it's just chemistry? You think you can quantify care? Prove me wrong," Julian challenged softly. 30 days. You run the test kitchen. You tell the engineers what to do. If you succeed, we change the industry. If you fail, well, you still get the consulting fee. Evelyn looked at him. She saw the challenge, but she also saw something else, a desperate curiosity. He really didn't understand. He thought food was just fuel. "I'll do it," Evelyn said. Julian blinked, surprised by her sudden capitulation. "You will." "On one condition." Evelyn raised a finger. "You want to know how the sausage is made. You have to hold the grinder. You're not just the CEO for the next 30 days, Mr. Thorne. You're my sous chef." Julian let out a short, incredulous laugh. "I have a board of directors to manage. I can't be peeling apples." "Then I see you in court for my $1. Evelyn turned toward her car. "Wait." She stopped. She didn't turn around. She waited. "Fine," Julian said behind her. "I'll clear my mornings." Evelyn turned back, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Good. Baking starts at 4 a.m. Don't wear the suit. You'll ruin it." She got into her car and drove away, leaving the CEO of Thorne Culinary Logistics standing in the gathering dark, looking terrified. 4 a.m. Oh, Linda, that man has never seen 4 a.m. unless he was coming home from a gala. He is going to be eaten alive.
Or he's going to be eating humble pie. Literally. I have to give it to Evelyn. She didn't just take the bait. She pulled the fisherman into the water with her.
"It's strictly business, Linda." She has to teach him the basics before she can fix his machines.
Strictly business? Mary, you don't ask a handsome billionaire to meet you in the dark of the morning unless you want to see what he's made of. And I don't mean dough.
You are incorrigible, but I am worried. 30 days isn't a lot of time to teach a computer to love. Can they do it without killing each other first? Chapter 3. The Alchemy of 4 a.m. The town of Oakhaven was erased by darkness. There were no streetlights on, no cars moving, just the damp, heavy silence of the coast before dawn. Julian Thorne checked his watch. 3:58 a.m. He stood outside the back door of Hart's Hearth, shivering slightly. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He had opted for what he considered utility wear, a cashmere hoodie and designer joggers that probably cost more than Evelyn's delivery van. He felt ridiculous. He felt exhausted. And mostly, he felt a simmering irritation that he had allowed a grandmother with a rolling pin to bully him into manual labor. The door swung open before he could knock. Evelyn didn't say hello. She didn't smile. She was already in motion, a blur of white apron and focused energy. She thrust a stiff, folded bundle of fabric into his chest. "Apron," she said, turning back to the massive butcher block island. "Tie it tight. If you get loose threads in my dough, I'll sue you for another $1." Julian stepped inside. The warmth of the kitchen hit him like a physical wall, yeast, sugar, and the sharp, clean smell of lemon zest. It was overwhelming. He fumbled with the apron strings, feeling clumsy in the wake of her efficiency. "Wash up," Evelyn commanded, pointing to the deep steel sink without looking at him. "Hot water. 20 seconds. Don't use the scented soap. Use the yellow bar." He obeyed. He was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. He had fired 3 VPs last month. And yet, he was scrubbing his fingernails with a yellow bar of soap because Evelyn Hart told him to. "Today is prep," Evelyn said, sliding a crate of chilled apples toward him. "We don't use the peeler machine for the Sunday best tarts. It bruises the fruit. Hand peel. Thin strips." Julian stared at the crate. There were at least 50 pounds of apples. "You hand peel 50 pounds of apples daily?" "Yes. The machine heats the flesh. Heat releases the pectin too early. You get mush." She handed him a small, curved knife. "Start." For the next hour, the only sound was the shhk of the knife and the hum of the ovens. Julian's hand began to cramp after the 20th apple. His thumb grew sore. He watched Evelyn across the island. She was making the crust. Her hands moved with a rhythm that seemed less like cooking and more like a dance. She didn't measure the water. She poured it from a pitcher, stopping by instinct. "You're watching me?" Evelyn said, not looking up. "I'm observing the workflow," Julian corrected, shifting his weight. "You're the bottleneck, Evelyn. You can't scale instinct. If I can't measure what you're doing, I can't program the machines to replicate it." "Then your machines are stupid," she snapped. "My machines are consistent," he countered. He dropped a peel into the bin. "Consistency builds empires. Artistry builds this." He gestured vaguely at the small, cluttered kitchen. "This," Evelyn said, stopping her hands, "is why people drive 3 hours to stand in line on a Tuesday." She grabbed a small ball of raw dough and walked over to him. "Taste it." Julian hesitated. "It's raw flour." "Taste it." He took a small pinch. He expected the chalky, bland taste of raw starch. Instead, it dissolved on his tongue, rich, slightly salty, with a nuttiness he couldn't identify. It didn't taste like ingredients. It tasted like a memory. The butter, Julian said, his eyes widening slightly. It's not just high fat. It's cultured. And hazelnut. Brown butter. Evelyn nodded, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. I brown a third of it before chilling it back down. Your factory just pumps in liquid fat. Julian looked at the dough on his finger. Brown butter. It was a logistical nightmare. It required heating, cooling, solidifying, and then tempering again. It would add 3 hours to the production cycle. It would cost millions in new equipment. But he tasted it, and for a second, he wasn't the CEO. He was just a man eating something delicious in a warm kitchen while the world outside was cold. We can't do this on the line, Julian said quietly. The cooling tanks aren't designed for semi-solids. Then change the tanks, Evelyn said, returning to her station. Or stop calling it a tart. Call it a hockey puck and leave me alone. Julian didn't answer. He picked up the knife and the next apple. The silence that settled between them wasn't as sharp as before. It was the silence of two people who had just recognized a common language, even if they were speaking different dialects. They worked until the windows turned gray with dawn. Just as Julian was wiping the counter, a low rumble shook the floorboards. The sound of a heavy diesel engine idling outside. Evelyn froze. What is that? Julian untied his apron, the CEO mask sliding back into place. That, he said, smoothing his cashmere hoodie, is the prototype. If we're going to try to automate your brown butter process, we need the small batch mixer. I had it overnight from the R&D facility in Chicago. Evelyn walked to the window. A massive semi-truck was blocking the sunrise, its air brakes hissing like a warning. You brought a factory into my driveway, she whispered. I told you, Evelyn, Julian said, opening the back door to greet the driver. I'm not here to learn how to bake. I'm here to learn how to win.
Oh, the nerve. He brings a semi-truck to a residential neighborhood at dawn? If I were Evelyn, I'd put sugar in his gas tank.
But Linda, did you hear what he said? He recognized the brown butter. He has a palate. He's not just a suit. He's a foodie in disguise.
He's a foodie who just blocked her driveway with a 2-ton mixer. That's not romance, Mary. That's a zoning violation.
It's a partnership. He's trying to meet her halfway. She brings the flavor. He brings the heavy lifting. But I don't think Evelyn's floorboards can handle that kind of help.
Her floorboards might break, but I think her patience is going to snap first. Let's see what happens when they try to fit a square robot into a round kitchen.
Chapter 4. The Chrome Beast. The mixer was a monstrosity. Julian called it the X7 emulsion unit. Evelyn called it the Beast. It was sleek, chrome, and roughly the size of a smart car. It took 3 men from the delivery crew to wedge it into the corner where Evelyn's rocking chair used to sit. Now, the chair was banished to the porch, and the kitchen looked like a cyborg had moved in. It fits, Julian said, patting the cold steel flank of the machine. He looked pleased with himself. He had even rolled up his sleeves to help guide it in, getting a smear of grease on his forearm that he hadn't noticed yet. It fits like a hippopotamus fits in a bathtub, Evelyn muttered. She was wiping flour off the counter, trying to reclaim her space. The kitchen felt different, crowded, metallic, hostile. We need to run the brown butter simulation, Julian said, ignoring her grumbling. He tapped a digital screen on the side of the machine. I've programmed the thermal cycle. It heats, browns, chills, and whips in one continuous loop. No human error. No burnt batches. Evelyn crossed her arms. And no love. Love is a variable I can't code, Evelyn. But precision? That I can code. He pressed a green button. The machine didn't just turn on. It roared. A low, thrumming vibration traveled through the floorboards, rattling the jars of cinnamon and nutmeg on the shelf. Then came the whine, a high-pitched turbine spin that made Evelyn's teeth ache. Is it supposed to do that? She shouted over the noise. It's calibrating. Julian shouted back, not looking concerned. He was watching the digital readout like a hawk. Look, temperature is climbing. 350 degrees, perfect browning point achieved in 40 seconds. Evelyn watched. She hated to admit it, but the machine was fast. Usually, browning the butter took her 20 minutes of careful watching at the stove. The machine did it in under a minute. The whirring slowed, then shifted to a deep, rhythmic thump-thump-thump as the cooling paddles engaged. Phase 2, Julian yelled, pointing at the display. Rapid cooling. It's tempering the fat crystals. This is it, Evelyn. This is how we scale it. He looked at her, his blue eyes bright with genuine excitement. It was the first time she had seen him look like a boy with a new toy rather than a tired executive. For a split second, she didn't want to ruin it for him. But then the shelf above the sink began to walk. The vibration from the X7 was shaking the old plaster walls, the collection of antique teacups. Evelyn's mother's teacups were inching toward the edge. Turn it off, Evelyn shouted, lunging toward the sink. Wait, the emulsion is stabilizing. We're at 90%. Julian didn't see the cups. He only saw the data. Julian, the shelf. Crash. It wasn't a teacup. It was the framed first dollar that had hung over the doorway since 1948. It shook loose from its nail, plummeting down to smash onto the tile floor. The glass shattered into 1,000 diamonds. Julian slammed the emergency stop. The silence that followed was deafening. The machine wound down with a dying wheeze. Julian looked from the screen to the floor where Evelyn was kneeling. She wasn't looking at him. She was picking up the shards of glass, her hands trembling slightly. The dollar bill sat amidst the wreckage, wrinkled and exposed. Evelyn, Julian started, stepping forward. I can replace the glass. I'll buy you a museum-grade frame. It's not the glass, you fool, Evelyn whispered. She stood up, clutching the dollar bill. This building breathes. It settles. It has a rhythm. You can't just force your high-speed world into my foundation without breaking something. She placed the dollar on the counter and looked at the chrome beast. Open it, she said. Let's see if your miracle butter is worth my history. Julian hesitated, the guilt evident on his face, but he pressed the release latch. The lid hissed open. Inside, the butter was perfect. It was a rich, golden hazelnut color. The texture was silky, aerated, precise. It was exactly what Evelyn spent hours achieving by hand. Technically, it was a triumph. It worked, Julian said softly. He didn't sound happy. He sounded apologetic. Evelyn dipped a finger in and tasted it. It was good. It was very good. It has the flavor, she admitted, her voice flat. But it has no pulse. She wiped her hand on her apron. You can keep your machine, Mr. Thorne. But if you turn it on again while my customers are eating, I will pour concrete into the gears. Do we understand each other? Julian nodded slowly. We do. Good, Evelyn said. She walked to the door and flipped the sign to open. Now put on a clean apron. The machine made the butter, but You still have to roll the dough, and the machine can't help you with that. As the first customer pushed the door open, Julian looked at the shattered glass on the floor, then at the sleek machine that had caused it. He realized with a sinking feeling that efficiency had a price he hadn't calculated. Oh, my heart broke right along with that picture frame. That first dollar is sacred. You don't mess with the first dollar.
He's lucky she didn't feed him into the mixer, Mary. But did you catch the look on his face? He wasn't proud of the butter. He was ashamed of the mess. That's progress.
It's a hard lesson. He's learning that you can be right and still be wrong. The butter was perfect, but the vibe was ruined.
Welcome to marriage, Julian. Or partnership. Whatever this is. But now he's stuck. He has a machine he can't turn on, and a woman who is watching his every move.
And 30 days is ticking away. How is he going to scale the recipe if he can't use the beast? He's going to have to get creative. Or get exhausted. Chapter 5. The Hands of the CEO. Julian Thorne was covered in white dust. It was in his eyebrows, on his eyelashes, and smeared across the front of his black t-shirt like war paint. It's shrinking, Julian said through gritted teeth. He was staring at the circle of dough on the marble slab. 30 seconds ago, he had rolled it out to a perfect 12 inches. Now it was an elastic, lumpy 10-inch puddle that seemed to be mocking him. It's shrinking because you're angry at it, Evelyn said. She was at the oven, pulling out a tray of muffins, looking cool and unbothered. I am not angry at the dough. Julian snapped, hitting it again with the rolling pin. Thwack. I am applying kinetic force to achieve surface area. You are beating it into submission, Evelyn corrected. She slid the tray onto the rack and wiped her hands. Gluten reacts to stress, Mr. Thorne. The more you fight it, the tougher it gets. Right now, that crust is going to taste like shoe leather. Julian dropped the rolling pin. It clattered loudly on the marble. He slumped against the counter, defeated. I don't understand, he admitted, his voice rough with exhaustion. I memorized the ratios. I weighed the water to the gram. The temperature is constant. Why won't it yield? Because you're trying to dominate it. Evelyn walked around the island. She didn't look at his face. She looked at his hands. They were large, capable hands, hands that signed million-dollar contracts, but they were tense, the knuckles white. Move, she said softly. Julian stepped aside, but only barely. Evelyn didn't take his place. Instead, she stood next to him, her shoulder brushing his arm. Put your hands on the pin, she instructed. Julian hesitated, then placed his hands on the wooden handles. Now, Evelyn said. She reached out and placed her hands over his. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt very thin. Julian froze. Her hands were warm, dry, and surprisingly strong. They encompassed his fingers, her thumbs resting lightly on his knuckles. He could smell the scent of vanilla extract and something floral, lavender soap, rising from her wrists. Don't push down, Evelyn whispered, her voice right beside his ear. Push out, like a wave. She guided his movement. Forward, light, lift. Turn. Forward, light, lift. Feel the resistance, she asked. Yes, Julian breathed. He was acutely aware of the contact. It was the most physical touch he had experienced in years that didn't involve a handshake. Respect the resistance, Evelyn murmured. If it pushes back, you stop. You let it rest. You don't force the expansion. You wait for it. They moved in tandem. For a moment, a strange four-handed creature rolling out the perfect circle. The dough obeyed. It relaxed. It spread thin and translucent, smooth as silk. There, Evelyn said, pulling her hands away. The loss of warmth was immediate. Julian stared at the dough. It was perfect. I see, Julian said. His voice sounded strained. He cleared his throat. It's about tension management. It's about listening, Evelyn corrected, stepping back to her safe distance. She adjusted her apron, avoiding his gaze. The machine can mix the butter, Julian, but the machine cannot feel the tension. That is why you are here. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The kitchen hummed with the sound of the refrigerators and the unspoken current running between them. Julian looked at her, really looked at her, not as a lawsuit, but as the architect of something he couldn't buy. And then the spell broke. BZCZZZT. BZCZZZT. Julian's phone, vibrating violently against the marble counter. He flinched, snapping back to reality. He grabbed the phone, seeing the caller ID. It was his vice president of operations. Thorne, he answered, his voice instantly shifting back to the clipped, authoritative tone of the CEO. Evelyn watched him transform. The vulnerability vanished. The shoulders squared. The eyes went cold. What? Julian listened. His jaw tightened. That's impossible. The timeline was 30 days. He listened again. He looked at Evelyn, then at the perfect circle of dough they had just made. No, Julian said sharply. Tell them I'm not ready. Stall them. A pause. Friday? That's in 48 hours. He hung up the phone and set it down slowly. The silence that followed was heavy, but this time it wasn't romantic. It was dreadful. Bad news. Evelyn asked, dusting flour off her hands. The board, Julian said, running a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of white flour in the silver. They heard rumors. They think I've lost my mind. They think I'm running the company into the ground from a bakery in a nowhere town. He looked at Evelyn, his eyes desperate. They aren't waiting 30 days. They're flying in on Friday. They want a tasting. If the Sunday best tart isn't ready for mass production, they're going to vote to remove me as CEO. Evelyn looked at the single, perfect pie crust on the counter. Then she looked at the silent, grounded machine in the corner. 48 hours, Evelyn said, to teach a machine to have a soul. Or I lose everything, Julian replied. Evelyn sighed, untying her apron and tossing it onto the counter. Well then, she said, her eyes flashing with a spark of battle. Wash your hands, Mr. Thorne. We're going to need more coffee.
48 hours. Talk about a pressure cooker. Mary, I get stressed if I have to bake a lasagna in 48 hours. He has to save his career.
And Evelyn has to decide if she wants to save him. Did you see that moment with the rolling pin? Push out like a wave. Oh my goodness. I needed a fan just listening to it.
The dough wasn't the only thing getting warm in that kitchen. But now the romance is over and the real work begins. The board is coming. And corporate boards are not known for their sense of whimsy.
Can they do it? Can they combine the beast and the beauty in 2 days? Or is Julian going to be trading his Italian suits for a permanent apron? Chapter 6, The Golden Parachute. The kitchen was quiet, not the heavy, hostile silence of Tuesday, but the hushed, reverent silence of a cathedral. On the cooling rack sat 12 tarts. They were identical. Their crusts were the color of toasted hazelnuts. The filling had set with that specific, slight wobble that indicated perfection. Not too stiff, not too runny. Evelyn leaned against the counter, her eyes burning with fatigue. She wiped a smudge of flour from her cheek. Next to her, Julian sat on a stool, his head in his hands, staring at the tray. "We did it," he whispered. His voice was cracked, stripped of all corporate polish. "The X7 held the temperature," Evelyn admitted, looking at the chrome machine with a grudging respect. "You adjusted the torque on the paddles. It didn't bruise the dough." "I slowed it down," Julian said, looking up. His eyes were red-rimmed but shining. "I told the engineers to ignore efficiency and prioritize tenderness. They thought I was insane." "You were insane," Evelyn smiled. It was her first real smile at him. "But you were right." Julian reached out and took one of the tarts. He broke it in half. The sound was a crisp, delicate snap, the sound of a perfect short crust. He handed half to Evelyn. They ate in silence. It was indistinguishable from the ones Evelyn made by hand. It was rich, buttery, and deeply comforting. "This changes everything," Julian said, swallowing the last bite. He stood up, pacing the small kitchen with a renewed, frenetic energy. "The board arrives at noon. They'll taste this. They'll see the data. And you'll keep your job," Evelyn said, dusting crumbs from her apron. "And I get my quiet life back." "Better," Julian said. He pulled his phone out, scrolling rapidly. "I can finally exit." Evelyn paused, a wet rag in her hand. "Exit." Julian didn't look up. He was typing furiously. "The only reason I haven't left Thorne Logistics is because the company's valuation has been tanking. My stock options were worthless. But this," he gestured to the tarts, "this proprietary technology, this proves we can automate artisanal quality. The acquisition value just tripled." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Acquisition?" Evelyn asked, her voice very quiet. "Global Harvest Foods," Julian said, finally looking at her, his face lit by the blue glow of the screen. "They've been trying to buy us out for a year. I held them off because the price was too low. But with the Hart protocol integrated into the X7, I can sell the whole division by Monday. I can walk away with 50 million. I can finally be free of this nightmare." He smiled at her, a genuine conspiratorial smile. He thought she would be happy for him. He thought they were partners in a heist. Evelyn set the rag down. She felt cold. "You're selling it?" she asked. "To Global Harvest?" "Yes. They're the biggest conglomerate in the world. They are the ones who put sawdust in their Parmesan cheese to save money," Evelyn said, stepping closer. "They are the ones who buy family brands and strip them for parts. They fire the bakers and hire chemists." Julian's smile faltered. "Evelyn, it's business. The recipe is preserved in the code. It doesn't matter who owns the factory. It matters to me." Evelyn slammed her hand on the counter. The vibration rattled the tray of perfect tarts. "I didn't stay up for 2 days to help you fatten a pig for slaughter. I taught you how to make this thing, because I thought you wanted to save the quality, not sell it to the highest bidder. I am saving myself." Julian snapped, the exhaustion suddenly turning him sharp. "Do you know what it's like to carry a legacy you didn't ask for? My father built this company. I'm just the janitor cleaning up his mess. I want out, Evelyn, and you just gave me the key." He reached for the tray of tarts. "I need to box these. The board is landing in 4 hours." Evelyn moved faster than he expected. She grabbed the tray, before he could touch it. Evelyn, Julian warned, his voice low, put the tarts down. You want to sell my grandmother's soul to Global Harvest. Evelyn's eyes were filled with tears, but her jaw was set like granite. You want to show them that quality can be automated so they can fire 1,000 people and sell a lie? I own the company. Evelyn, I own the machine. Give me the tarts. You own the machine, Evelyn whispered. But you don't own the labor. She walked to the sink. Evelyn, don't. Julian lunged. She tipped the tray. 12 perfect, golden tarts slid off the metal and into the soapy, gray dishwater. They bobbed for a second, then dissolved into a soggy, ruined mess. Julian froze. He stared at the sink. He looked at Evelyn. You just destroyed the prototype, he said, his voice hollow. No, Evelyn said, wiping her hands on her apron. I just saved it. She walked to the back door and held it open. The morning light was harsh and gray. Get out of my shop, Mr. Thorne, and take your robot with you. The board is coming at noon, Julian said, motionless. If I don't have a product, then I guess you'll have to serve them humble pie, Evelyn said. Now, get out. Julian looked at her one last time. He saw the wall he had hit. He turned and walked out into the cold morning, leaving the smell of brown butter and betrayal behind him. She dumped them in the sink, all of them? Linda, I can't breathe. I actually can't breathe.
That is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. She didn't just dump the tarts, Mary. She dumped him. She flushed $50 million down the drain because it was dirty money.
But the board, they are landing in 4 hours. Julian has nothing. He's going to be fired. He's going to be ruined.
He deserves it. He tried to sell her heart as a line item on a spreadsheet. You don't play poker with a woman who has nothing to lose, Julian.
But what happens now? The story can't end here. He's ruined. She's furious. How do they come back from this?
Well, they say rock bottom is the solid foundation on which you build your life. I think Julian just hit the concrete. Let's see if he breaks, or if he bounces.
Chapter 7. The Empty Box. The conference room at the Oak Haven Inn had been transformed. The wicker chairs were gone, replaced by sleek, rented office furniture brought in by assistants who didn't make eye contact. Julian sat at the head of the table. He was wearing his suit again, the charcoal gray armor. But it felt different today. It felt heavy. It felt like a costume. Across from him sat the board. 3 men and 2 women who looked like they had been carved out of marble. They checked their watches in unison. Mr. Thorne, said the chairman, a man named Sterling whose voice sounded like gravel crunching under tires. We are on a tight schedule. The Global Harvest Acquisition Team is on standby in New York. They are waiting for the green light based on today's tasting. Julian looked at the center of the table. There was a silver platter there. It was empty. There will be no tasting, Julian said. His voice was steady, shockingly calm. The silence that sucked the air out of the room was absolute. Sterling blinked, a slow, reptilian movement. Excuse me? The prototype failed. Julian lied. He didn't blink. He didn't fidget. The scalability of the heart protocol was overestimated. The X7 unit could not replicate the textural integrity of the crust. The batch was compromised. Compromised? One of the board members leaned forward. You sent us data logs yesterday showing 99% efficiency. Data is not flavor, Julian said. He looked at them, really looked at them. He saw the greed in their eyes. He saw the hunger for the buyout check. He realized Evelyn was right. They wouldn't care if the tart tasted like sawdust, as long as the stock price went up. You have 48 hours to fix it, Sterling snapped. Get back to that bakery. Force the woman to sign the IP transfer. We don't need her cooperation. We need her signature. No, Julian said. He reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a recipe. He pulled out his company ID badge and his encryption key. He slid them across the polished mahogany table. I am recommending that the board accept my resignation, effective immediately. Sterling stared at the badge. You're quitting? In the middle of a merger? You'll walk away with nothing. No severance. No stock options. You'll be destitute. Julian. Julian stood up. He buttoned his jacket. For the first time in 10 years, he felt a weight lift off his chest. I won't be destitute, Sterling, Julian said, a small, wry smile touching his lips. I'll just be broke. There's a difference. He turned and walked out of the room. He didn't look back. 2 hours later, the bell above the door of Hart's hearth chimed. Evelyn was sweeping. She always swept when she was upset. She had swept the floor 3 times already. The floor was spotless, but her mind was a mess. She expected a lawyer. She expected the sheriff. Instead, she got Julian. He looked different. The tie was gone. The jacket was thrown over his shoulder, hooked on one finger. He looked like a man who had walked 5 miles in dress shoes. He stopped at the counter. The bakery was empty. The afternoon lull had set in. The X7 machine still loomed in the corner, a silent chrome ghost. They fired you, Evelyn stated. It wasn't a question. I quit, Julian corrected. He placed his hands on the counter. Before they could fire me, it felt cleaner. Evelyn stopped sweeping. She gripped the broom handle. Because of the tarts? Because of the sawdust, Julian said softly. You were right. They didn't care about the product. They just wanted the asset. If I had given them those tarts, they would have fired you, taken the code, and cheapened the ingredients within a month. I couldn't let them have it. Evelyn stared at him. He had thrown away $50 million. For her, for a pie crust. You're an idiot, she whispered, her voice trembling. Probably, Julian agreed. He reached into his pocket. I came to settle my debt, Miss Hart. He pulled out a single, crisp dollar bill. He placed it on the counter, right where the first dollar used to be before the machine broke the frame. 1 United States dollar, Julian said formally, for theft of trade secrets. You won the lawsuit. Evelyn looked at the dollar. It looked small and ridiculous sitting on the wood. It was the victory she had wanted for weeks. She had wanted to humble him. She had wanted to win. So why did she feel like crying? You have no job, Evelyn said. You have no company. You have no car. I assume the company driver left. He did. Julian nodded. I believe I am currently stranded in Oak Haven. And you have nowhere to sleep because the corporate account at the inn just got canceled. Julian paused. I hadn't thought about that part yet. Evelyn looked at the dollar. Then she looked at the silent machine. Then she looked at the man who had cleaned 50 pounds of apples and rolled dough with her until sunrise. She reached out and took the dollar. She slid it into her apron pocket. The lawsuit is settled, Evelyn said stiffly. However, I have a new problem. Oh, I have a 2-ton mixer in my kitchen that I don't know how to uninstall. And since you brought it here, You are responsible for removing it. Julian looked at the X. 7. I don't have a crew anymore. Evelyn, then you'll have to take it apart yourself, Evelyn said. She walked over to the display case and pulled out a fresh, warm cinnamon roll. She put it on a plate and slid it toward him. It will probably take a few weeks. The sofa in the office is lumpy, but it's better than the park bench. Julian looked at the cinnamon roll. Then he looked at Evelyn. His eyes were shining. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me, Evelyn huffed, grabbing her broom again to hide her face. You're working for it. Shift starts at 4 a.m. Don't be late. He paid the $1. Linda, he paid the $1. And she gave him a cinnamon roll. That is the currency of love.
It's the currency of survival, Mary. He's homeless and unemployed. She just hired a very overqualified squatter.
Chapter 8. The Ghost in the Ledger. The repo men didn't look like the delivery crew. The delivery crew had been young, chatty guys in polo shirts. These men wore dark jumpsuits and expressions that suggested they had removed hearts as often as they removed machinery. Asset recovery. The lead man barked, holding up a clipboard. He didn't wait for an invitation. He signaled to his team, and they pushed past Evelyn, their boots heavy on the hardwood floor. Julian emerged from the back office. He was wearing a white t-shirt covered in flour and a pair of jeans that were rapidly losing their designer sheen. You have no warrant to enter, Julian said, his voice finding a trace of its old authority. Don't need one, Mr. Thorne. The man sneered, not even looking at him. Equipment is leased property of Thorne Logistics. Clause 14b. Default on employment contract triggers immediate asset reclamation. He pointed to the corner. Disconnect it. Drag it out. Evelyn watched in horror as they swarmed the X7 machine. They were careless. They ripped the water lines out, spraying water across the floor. They dragged the heavy steel feet across the tile, leaving deep, jagged scratches in the floor she had polished for 40 years. Careful! Evelyn shouted, stepping forward. You're tearing up the floor. Step back, ma'am. One of the men warned, shoving a dolly against the counter. Let them take it, Julian said, putting a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. His grip was tight. It's just metal, Evelyn. Let it go. They watched as the beast was dismantled. It took 20 minutes. When they hauled the main unit out the door, it scraped against the doorframe, splintering the wood. Then they were gone. The truck rumbled away, leaving a silence that felt like a bruise. The kitchen looked like a war zone. Water pooled on the floor. The scratches were white scars on the dark wood. The empty corner where the machine had stood looked gaping and dark. Julian walked over to the puddle of water. He grabbed a mop. He didn't say a word. He just started cleaning up the mess his world had brought into hers. Evelyn watched him. She saw the slump of his shoulders. He looked defeated. He looked like a man who realized he was poison to everything he touched. I should go, Julian said, not looking up from the mop. Sterling won't stop with the machine. He'll come for the building next. He'll find a zoning violation. He'll sue you for improper storage. I need to leave before I burn this place down too. Stop mopping, Evelyn said. Evelyn, I'm serious. I'm a liability. I said, stop mopping. Evelyn walked to the antique hutch in the dining area. She reached up to the highest shelf, past the teacups, past the spice jars, and pulled down a book. It was thick, bound in cracked black leather, and smelled like nutmeg and old paper. She walked back to the kitchen and slammed it onto the island. Dust motes danced in the light. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. Julian leaned the mop against the wall. "A recipe book." "It's the ledger," Evelyn said. "My grandmother started it in 1920. Every sale, every debt, every favor." She opened the book. The pages were yellow and brittle, covered in looping, elegant cursive. She flipped through the decades: 1930, 1940, 1950. She stopped at a page dated October 14th, 1952. "Read this," she commanded, pointing to a line at the bottom. Julian leaned in. The ink was faded, but legible. "Loan to Arthur Thorne, $500. Use of delivery van for 6 months. Access to county supply routes. Payment pending." Julian froze. "Arthur Thorne. That's my father." "Your father didn't start Thorne Logistics in a garage in Chicago like the company bio says," Evelyn revealed, her voice steady. "He started it here, in this driveway, delivering pies for my grandmother." Julian stared at the page. His entire life, he had been told his father was a self-made genius of infrastructure. He didn't know his father had been a delivery boy. He had a vision. Evelyn continued. He wanted to deliver faster. He wanted to build a network. "My grandmother gave him the money to buy his first truck. She gave him the maps of the county. He never paid it back." Julian whispered, tracing his father's name. "Oh, he tried," Evelyn said. "He came back 10 years later, rich and famous. He offered her a check. She tore it up." Evelyn flipped the page. Taped to the back of the 1952 entry was a folded, yellowed piece of paper, a handwritten contract. She didn't want money, Evelyn said. She wanted assurance. She made him sign this. Julian unfolded the paper. His eyes widened as he read the simple, handwritten terms. In exchange for initial capital and logistical support, Arthur Thorne agrees that the intellectual property of Hart's Hearth, specifically the distribution methods and preservation techniques derived herein, shall remain the perpetual property of the Hart family. Thorne Logistics serves as a guardian, not an owner. It was signed by Arthur Thorne and witnessed by a notary. Julian looked up, his face pale. This predates the incorporation of Thorne Logistics. It means, Evelyn said, a fierce light in her eyes, that your board doesn't own the process, Julian. They don't even own the distribution model. According to this, I do. Julian started to laugh. It was a breathless, incredulous sound. My father didn't invent the logistics, he said, shaking his head. He borrowed them from a pie shop, and he signed away the rights to the core methodology to keep the secret. He looked at the empty corner where the machine had been. Then he looked at Evelyn. They took the machine, Julian said, his mind racing, the CEO sharpening emerging again. But this time, it was dangerous. But they didn't take the foundation. Evelyn, this piece of paper, this is a nuclear bomb. Can we use it? Evelyn asked. Julian grabbed his phone. We aren't just going to use it. We're going to take back the company. He looked at her, and the distance between them vanished. You sued me for $1. Julian grinned. How would you like to sue them for everything else? Oh my goodness. The grandmother knew. She was playing the long game from the grave.
Now that is a plot twist. Arthur Thorne wasn't a genius. He was a delivery boy with a generous backer. And he signed a contract. A handwritten contract is still a contract, Mary.
Evelyn owns the logistics. She owns the whole idea. Oh, I hope Sterling and those board members are enjoying their expensive lunch, because they are about to get terrible indigestion.
Julian has the ammo now, and he knows exactly where the bodies are buried because his last name is on the tombstone. This isn't just business anymore. This is a family feud.
Chapter 9. The Poison Pill. The grand ballroom of the Oak Haven Inn smelled of expensive lilies and premature victory. Sterling stood at the head of a long table draped in white linen. Beside him were the executives from Global Harvest, men who looked like they were made of sharkskin and teeth. A bottle of champagne sat in a silver bucket, sweating in the heat of the room. Signatures here. And here, Sterling said, sliding a thick document toward the Global Harvest CEO. This concludes the acquisition of Thorne Culinary Logistics, including all proprietary automation technology. The Global Harvest CEO, a man named Vance, uncapped a fountain pen. Excellent work, Sterling. The X7 unit is already en route to our Chicago facility. It is, Sterling smirked. We extracted it this morning. The obstacle has been removed. The pen touched the paper. Bang. The double doors at the back of the ballroom didn't just open. They flew wide, hitting the walls with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. Every head turned. Julian Thorne stood in the doorway. He had shaved. He had put his suit back on, though it was slightly wrinkled from being balled up on a sofa. But it was the woman standing next to him who commanded the room. Evelyn Hart wore a navy blue Sunday dress, a string of real pearls, and an expression that could curdle milk at 50 paces. She held the black leather ledger against her chest like a shield. Step away from the table, Julian commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it projected with the effortless power of a man who had run boardrooms for 20 years. Security! Sterling shouted, his face reddening. Get them out of here. He's a trespassing ex-employee. I wouldn't do that, Julian said calmly, striding into the room. Evelyn matched his pace, her heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the parquet floor. Unless you want to add assault on a majority stakeholder to your list of crimes. Stakeholder? Sterling laughed nervously. You resigned, Julian. You own nothing. I don't, Julian agreed. He stopped at the foot of the table. But she does. He gestured to Evelyn. Evelyn didn't say a word. She walked to the center of the room. She looked at Vance, the Global Harvest CEO. Then she looked at Sterling. With a heavy thud, she dropped the ledger onto the table, right on top of the acquisition contract. What is this? Vance asked, looking down at the cracked leather book with distaste. That, Evelyn said, her voice clear and ringing, is the original operating agreement for Thorne Logistics, dated October 14th, 1952. It's a diary, Sterling scoffed. Ignore her. Turn to page 42, Evelyn ordered. Vance, curious despite himself, flipped the book open. He saw the yellowed contract taped to the page. He read it. His eyes narrowed. Mr. Sterling, Vance said slowly, were you aware of a perpetual lien on the company's intellectual property? A what? Sterling sputtered. It's a lie. It's a forgery. It's notarized. Julian cut in, stepping forward. And here is the kicker, Sterling. The Thorne clause. My father agreed that if the company ever attempted to sell the core logistics model to a non-family entity, the rights revert instantly to the lender. Julian leaned over the table, placing his hands flat on the wood. The lender is the Hart family. The room went dead silent. You could hear the champagne bubbles popping. That means, Julian continued, a shark-like smile spreading across his face, that the X7 machine you stole this morning, the one currently on a truck to Chicago, that is stolen property. And the proprietary technology you are trying to sell to Global Harvest, Evelyn owns it. Vance capped his pen. The click was deafening. Is this true? Vance asked Sterling. It's archaic. It's unenforceable. Sterling was sweating now. We have the patents. Patents based on stolen trade secrets. Evelyn interrupted. She looked at Vance. My lawyer, who is currently filing an injunction at the county courthouse, would love to discuss the definition of prior art with you, or you can walk away. Vance looked at the contract. He looked at the sweating Sterling. He looked at Evelyn, who stood tall and unshakable. He picked up the acquisition contract, the billion-dollar deal, and ripped it in half. Global Harvest does not acquire litigation, Vance said coldly. He stood up. Mr. Sterling, you have wasted my time. Vance, wait. Sterling scrambled after him. We can fight this. You can fight it alone. Vance signaled his team. They packed up their briefcases in seconds. As the Global Harvest executives filed out, Vance paused by Evelyn. He looked at the grandmotherly woman in the navy dress. That must be some pie, he muttered. It's the best in the state, Evelyn replied. But you'll never taste it. Vance walked out. Sterling was left alone at the table, surrounded by empty chairs and a ruined deal. He looked at Julian with pure hatred. You destroyed it, Sterling hissed. You burned the whole company to the ground. Thorne Logistics is worthless now. Stock will drop to zero by morning. Good, Julian said. He picked up the ledger and handed it back to Evelyn. Then I guess I can buy it back for pennies. He turned to Evelyn and offered her his arm. Miss Hart, I believe we have a truck to intercept. Evelyn took his arm. She looked at Sterling one last time. Mr. Sterling, she said politely, you're sitting in my seat. And with that, they turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving the man in the expensive suit staring at a table full of nothing. Yes, did you hear that pen click? That was the sound of victory. She stopped the merger.
Global Harvest does not acquire litigation. Oh, music to my ears. Evelyn Hart just walked into a boardroom and stared down $1 billion without blinking.
And Julian, I guess I can buy it back for pennies. He didn't just save her recipe. He just engineered a hostile takeover of his own company.
It's brilliant. The stock crashes because the deal failed. Julian buys the controlling shares for cheap. He's back in charge, but this time he answers to Evelyn.
Chapter 10. The best thing since sliced bread. The sign above the door had changed. It was subtle, hand-painted in gold leaf by the local artisan, but it changed the landscape of Oak Haven. It no longer just read Hart's Hearth. Beneath it, in smaller, elegant letters, it read, partnered with Hart and Thorne Logistics. Julian Thorne stood on the sidewalk, admiring the paint. He wasn't wearing a charcoal suit. He was wearing a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up and sturdy work boots. He looked 10 years younger. If you stare at it any longer, I'm going to charge you rent for the sidewalk. Evelyn's voice drifted through the screen door. Julian smiled and walked inside. The bakery was humming. It was organized chaos, but for the first time in years, Evelyn wasn't running frantically between the oven and the counter. She was standing at the display case, chatting with Mrs. Higgins about her grandkids. In the back corner, the beast, the X7 machine, was humming quietly. It had been returned, repurchased, and modified. It no longer tried to bake the tarts. Now it simply mixed the heavy dough and peeled the apples, doing the grunt work so the humans could focus on the art. Julian walked past the counter and into the back office. It used to be a closet filled with receipts. Now, it was the global headquarters of a boutique logistics firm. He sat at his desk, which was just a folding table, and checked the monitor. Stock is up another 4%. He called out. Evelyn walked in, wiping her hands on her apron. She leaned against the doorframe. Global Harvest is still trying to sue us for the patent. Let them try. Julian laughed, leaning back in his creaking chair. The grandmother's ledger is bulletproof. We own the process. We own the flavor. And as long as we keep the production small batch, they can't touch us. Small batch, Evelyn repeated, testing the word. You realize we shipped 10,000 units last week. That's not small, Julian. It is compared to the sawdust they were selling. He countered. He stood up and walked over to her. The office was tiny. They were standing very close. The smell of cinnamon and coffee clung to both of them. A shared perfume. Evelyn, Julian said, his voice dropping to that serious, quiet tone he used when he was negotiating. If this is about the delivery van, Evelyn warned, I already told you we are not painting racing stripes on it. It's not about the van. Julian reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, rectangular object wrapped in brown butcher paper. I found something, he said, when I was cleaning out the wreckage of my old office in the city, before I sold the building. Evelyn took the package. It was light. She unwrapped the paper. Inside was a simple wooden frame, and behind the glass, smoothed out and perfectly preserved, was a single wrinkled dollar bill. The $1. Evelyn looked at it, the symbol of her stubbornness, the symbol of his defeat. I thought you spent this on cinnamon rolls, she whispered. I saved it, Julian said. He reached out and took her hand. His thumb brushed over her flour-dusted knuckles. Because it was the best investment I ever made. It cost me my fortune, my reputation, and my penthouse. But it bought me this. He gestured to the cramped office, the noisy machine, and the woman standing in front of him. It bought me a home. Evelyn looked up at him. Her eyes, usually so sharp and guarded, were soft. She saw the man who had peeled apples until his hands cramped. She saw the man who had faced down a boardroom for her. You're a fool, Julian Thorne, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I know, he smiled, but I'm a happy fool. Well, Evelyn said, stepping closer and resting her head against his chest, just for a moment. Since you're the majority shareholder, I suppose you can stay. Julian wrapped his arms around her. They stood there in the quiet of the back office, listening to the hum of the machine and the chime of the doorbell. Julian? Evelyn asked into his flannel shirt. Yes, Evie? Don't get used to the flannel. We have a meeting with the distributor on Monday. Wear the suit. Julian chuckled, a deep, warm sound that vibrated through her. Yes, ma'am. Outside, the sun began to set over Oakhaven, casting a golden glow over the sign that promised a legacy built on butter, sugar, and a little bit of stubborn love. He framed the dollar. He framed the dollar. Linda, that is the most romantic thing I have ever heard in my entire life.
It's certainly cheaper than a diamond ring, but I'll admit, it has more value. He invested in his happiness. That's a smart portfolio.
And Hart and Thorne. It sounds so official. They are a team now. A real team.
They are. They proved that you don't have to choose between the old ways and the new ways. You just have to find the right partner to help you carry the load.
Oh, I am going to bake a pie tonight. I don't care if it's midnight. This story has made me hungry for love and pastry.
Save me a slice, Mary. And to all our listeners, keep your rolling pins handy and your hearts open. You never know who might walk through that door.
Until next time, darlings, this is Mary
And Linda,
signing
signing
off.
off.